Oh, hey man, you've been painting down here for like a week straight. I'm just checking in to see if you're dead. Good, good. Say, I just thought maybe since the smell seeping through the door was so pungent that you had died and maybe turned into a zombie. Then I'd have to shoot you in the head to prevent you from biting other people. Anyway, good luck with your golden demon painting. Over the last 3 months, I've been working on the biggest, most time-intensive Warhammer project of my life. And I've done a few videos on the project to bring you along for the process of the building and painting of a couple of figures, so you can check those out if you haven't. But with the Golden Demon competition right around the corner, I've had to crank up the hours if I have any hopes of finishing this thing on time. I have the models mostly all painted, but today we're going to do the most important step, pulling it all together for a cohesive piece before I lose my sanity. When working on a large project with lots of figures, I found that I don't ever really feel truly confident in how it's going to turn out until I get everything placed on a painted base and figure out where I need to tweak and improve. I always have this dreadful feeling that even though I'm pretty happy with how the 5 figures are painted, that I'll put them all together on the base and it'll end up looking like garbage. So if I'm going to get this thing done on time, by the end of this video, we'll have to have created the whole scene. But first, I need to put as much effort into painting the base as I did with each figure. After masking off the plinth of our rim in hopes of keeping that nice glossy black finish intact, I'm airbrushing on a few thin coats of the same dark purple color I've used as a shadow on every figure in the scene. My hopes for using a universal shadow color through everything is that it will pull all the models and the environment together, so they'll feel cohesive and at home together. So this is what I'm hoping will happen, but I've never really done it on a large project before. But I really feel like trying new things and experimenting should not be off limits when you're trying your hardest on a project. Sometimes it'll work, and sometimes it won't. Just like this weird yellow-brown I decided to use to paint the dirt. I hadn't used the color before, but just looking at it, my gut says this isn't right. So I'm just going to paint over it and go from here. The thing that keeps me going on large projects like this one, which at this point is well over 200 hours of painting, is finding ways to keep it interesting. Trying out new paints, trying new techniques, anything to keep you interested. Because long projects will wear you down, but only if they stop being fun. So if I can keep it fun, I'll stay engaged in the project and the end product will be much better. This base consists of 2 main features, the dirt and the stone. I don't know about you, but the idea of painting dirt and rocks for dozens of hours doesn't jump out at me as fun. Like most painters, I usually go through painting bases quickly, slap down the base colors, dry brush a highlight or two, hit them with a wash, maybe an airbrushing of some interesting colors if I'm feeling spicy. But I've got to do more than that if I have any hopes at Golden Demon. So if I'm going to stay interested, I've got to find a way to make this fun. And as lame as it sounds, I found that fun in rediscovering the shapes, textures, and organic flow of earth that I sculpted on this base months ago. Painting miniatures is mostly bringing life to someone else's sculpture, so painting something that I put a lot of thought and time into to sculpt myself was a breath of fresh air. I'd ask myself questions like, what would fresh earth look like on this newly ruined city wall? What tones of yellows and browns will accent the painted figures? What areas do I want to catch more light, and what do I want cast in shadows? I don't have this all planned out either. Too much structure just isn't fun to me in painting. I'm just grabbing colors and different tools at my painting desk, trying them out, and figuring out what works as I go. And speaking of paints and tools, I put links down in the video description of everything I use if you want to check them out, including the new special edition wet palette that's live now on Kickstarter. I've partnered with Game Envy, who make my favorite wet palettes on the market. And a big thank you to those of you that support me by picking one up at the Kickstarter link below. I'm feeling like I need to get started on these rocks before I can decide how much further I want to push the dirt. So I mix a bit of our universal shadow color into a mid-tone gray and get started defining the shapes. Are you ready for some deep rock painting philosophy? Good. Rocks are natural, organic, chaotic material, and I find that they end up looking best if you wield your brush in an equally chaotic way while painting them. I don't worry about precision. I let my brush dance around the rock, following its curves, peaks, and edges. I'm not going to create smooth, even base coats. I'm going to let some of the pure dark areas go completely untouched. Each rock will be painted differently because each rock is unique in its own way. This is the most hippie sounding bullshit I've ever said on the channel. And silly as this sounds, it is fun. Well, at least for me. You don't end up with a sterile scene. You end up with something that feels more natural. And as I'm building up the highlights on our stones, I'm keeping in mind which areas, which surfaces, which edges would catch more light from the sun above. I'm also trying to picture where each model will stand and block some of that light that's hitting the stones. But this is really just guesswork, and I'm not stressing about it much. I can tweak that light once I see the figures on the base. Now, I do want the rocks to end up being brighter compared to the earth around them, especially on those sharp, jagged edges that define their shapes. But at this point, I'm not worried about adding all the depth of color that we see in nature on rocks. I'm just setting the foundation of the scene so that I'll have more fun messing with those colors soon enough. Once I have these main colors in place, I can go back and forth and find areas to improve and bring depth to our piece as a whole. For instance, here, I'm bringing in a brown ochre color to bring back some more warmth in the highlights of our dirt. Well, it's time to take down that live, laugh, love wall art and put something up that actually brings you joy. And today's sponsor, Displate, has exactly what you need with their one-of-a-kind metal posters featuring unique and licensed artwork. Their 21st century metal canvases mount on your walls in under 20 seconds and use magnets so there's never any holes or damage. And not only are they incredibly high quality with crisp, vibrant artwork, but they're also durable and are able to be swapped out in seconds. I regularly rearrange my collection of Displates around the studio here because some days I'm feeling a little extra nerdly. Displate has so many awesome licenses covered with amazing, unique artwork that pretty much any one of my nerdy interests are covered. And they're especially excited to announce that they now have a full selection of official Warhammer Displates. So whether you want to showcase amazing battle scenes in the Warhammer universe or just rep your favorite faction, you can now do it with the best wall art on the market. And if you use code NINJAN at checkout, you get up to 35% off your entire order. So check out the Displate link down in the video description below so your walls look as good as your next army. I've also got this little gnarled tree at the back of the scene, and as much as I want to just rush through this, I know that the Golden Demon judges will look at every tiny detail of the piece for imperfections. But this tree is kind of in the background of our scene, so I don't want it too bright and too obvious to grab attention. And I personally find that I struggle a lot with highlighting up areas that aren't supposed to be too bright. I just tend to think that they look unfinished or not highlighted enough, or that it looks like I didn't spend enough time painting them. Am I going to lose because I didn't paint this dead tree that's in the background to the best that I could? These are the kinds of nonsense things that you have to sit and think about for painting for hundreds of hours for your Golden Demon entry. All right, with that tree done, let's bring a bit more life back to this base with fun colors, starting with one of my favorite versatile colors on the planet, Rhinox hide. I love this color because of its versatility. It brings a nice dark brown with a richness of red to any surface, especially for things like rocks and dirt. It really brings in some depth of color while adding an interesting tone. And I'm not worried about only putting this on the dirt. It's gonna rush up the sides of the rocks as well, because these rocks wouldn't be perfectly clean in the dirty environment they're in. Next, I'll bring in an olive green to add some hints of vegetation all around the piece. I'm using a heavy glaze here. This is pretty thinned down paint because I don't want it to be too bright or overpowering too soon. Like everything we paint, this color is going to look brighter when the paint is wet, and as it dries, it's going to fade in naturally to the rest of the piece. And that's why I like using thin paints when I'm adding color variation. You'll get to control over how much you want to add that color through multiple coats. Otherwise, you can quickly cover up all the hard work you've done if your paint is too thick when you're adding this color later. And lastly, I use a yellowish orange shade paint thinned down and put over all of the brighter areas. Just like I've been using that dark purple as a universal shadow color, I've been using this as a universal tint across our highlighted areas to bring that warmth of the sun above. Now, onto my favorite part of base building, and that's putting down tons and tons of these cute little tiny tufts. And I like to use a wide variety of shapes, sizes, and coloration of tufts to give us a more realistic, natural look. When placing the tufts, I'm thinking about what would naturally grow in the scene I'm building. The story behind this scene is a group of soldiers coming to defend an area of town that was recently destroyed. So we won't have a lot of long established shrubbery and grasses here. That said, I do want to break up the environment with color and texture, so I've got to find that right balance between storytelling and visual interest with my tufts. A few tricks I use to place tufts effectively is to place my super glue on the tip of a paper clip or toothpick, just placing a single dot on the base where I want the tuft to be. From there, I can use my small tweezers to place and push down the tuft firmly into place on the super glue so the grass tuft looks like it's growing directly out of the base and not floating just above it. And I'm probably going to add more tufts once I get all the figures on the base to see where the bare spots are. It's good to remind myself that nothing that I'm painting, including the figures that are all done, are 100% complete. I need to really pull everything together, see how it works together, and make those final decisions then. But for now, I'm going to put a thin down wash over all of the tufts to pull them into the environment and feel a little bit more cohesive with the dirt and rocks. So now that our grass is on, we have another new variable to take into consideration for other tweaks and improvements before we place our figures. So I'm going around the base, figuring out different areas that I want more definition, more color depth, and adding that here before we get to completing it into the fun part. And as I'm peeling off the blue tack and painter's tape around the base, I'm telling myself not to get too excited once I start placing these figures. It's important to allow yourself a small victory for each step you complete on a big project. But I can't let myself feel like I'm all done here. I can see the finish line, and now is when I really need to analyze the piece for areas to improve and make it as cohesive as possible. Unfortunately, I'm feeling like because I've spent so many hours painting all of these figures, I'm kind of snowblind. I can't see the errors. I can't see where there's stuff to improve. And so I'm getting a little nervous. And that's why I found it's so important to take some good pictures at this step and ask for help. I've reached out to painters I admire and look up to for their feedback. No matter what you've painted, if you're looking to improve, it's important to ask for help from your peers. Getting honest and thoughtful feedback from people that are willing to put in that effort for you is literally one of the best ways that you can improve as a painter, no matter what skill level you're at currently. And if you're anything like me, you'll wince at every bit of feedback they give because it's a straight stab at all of your shortcomings in your paint job. But stay positive and keep moving forward. As long as you do, you'll find that you'll grow a lot by learning from other perspectives, and your final paint jobs will improve greatly over time. At this point, the feedback has started to roll back in, and I've created a list on my phone of all of that, but unfortunately, I only have a handful of days before Golden Demon to try to complete all of this. This project has been the most stressful, intense, and test of my painting willpower I've ever experienced. I'm glad I got to bring you along, and don't worry, I'll have one final installment where we look back at the final piece and the whole Golden Demon experience soon. It's because of your support and feedback that I've continued this series. I honestly can't thank you enough for liking the videos, subscribing to the channel, maybe picking up the new wet palette on Kickstarter and joining me on Patreon. Seriously, your support is what keeps me going and keeps this channel running. So if you'll excuse me, now I have to head back to my painting desk to put in more hours to try to make this piece as best as I can. But don't worry, I'll be back very soon with another new video. And sometime between now and then, make sure you find time in your day to slay the gray.